So I think we should say that the idea of a worldview is really inextricably linked with the idea of explanation, because worldviews give us a way to understand life, and there's a deep need to put things together. So I think that the way to understand the difference between the poetic paradigm or poetic worldview and the pre-Socratic worldview, if we can talk about worldviews, should highlight their idea of explanation. So we could say that in Homer, everything happens in terms of the gods. We have gods constantly interfering in the affairs of human beings, and we have also gods interfering in the domains of other gods as well. So, for instance, in the Odyssey, we have Athena interfering with the domain of Poseidon. And she was trying to convince Zeus to let Odysseus go back. And basically she goes and tells him how the future will unfold. So we could say that in Homer, everything is to be explained in terms of the will of the gods. Then in Hesiod...
Oh, could I just quickly say
Yeah, of course.
And in that view, in that worldview, the gods are not like the monotheistic, omniscient gods of the Judeo-Christian or even Islamic paradigm. Nothing like that. They're their own selfish, anthropomorphized beings. Like in the Iliad, for example, Ares or Apollo or someone will come down to the battlefield and have a one-on-one combat with a man, with Diomedes or something. They're like that. It's very, very different, isn't it? And of course, we look on it as a modern, as that sort of, again, a little bit childlike, or it's not reasonable, it's not rational, rather. That's not a rational way to look at the world. That never happened. That could not have happened. But Homer and Hesiod are an even earlier period, aren't they? They're sort of deep in antiquity.
Yeah. And I want to say about what you said about omniscience. I think that, the way I read it, and I'm not a great scholar of Odyssey by any chance, but I want to say that at some point, it seems to me that there's a contradiction in that Zeus is portrayed as someone who knows everything there is about the affairs of human being, which could be something like an omniscience. But in that sense, how did Athena change his mind?
It's funny, Zeus and Hera...
Did he know that already?
Zeus and Hera both seem to be a bit different. They seem to be on a different level. That they are somehow all-knowing, or not, certainly not all-knowing, but something closer to that. Whereas their children... Athena and Apollo or whoever are much less so, much less so. But I think that's a good point, actually, to point out that Zeus and Hera, it seems to me, if I remember, they seem to be much more godlike, if that's a way of putting it.
And Hesiod is a really interesting poet because he was portraying himself as a man of the people, as a farmer.
Right, and works and days and
yes, and he is putting forward a version of the succession myth. I think the succession myth is a trope, let's say, that we see in almost every civilization. We have an old order that was succeeded by a new order. So I want to say some bits about the theogony of Hesiod, about some parts, in order to show that Hesiod does have an idea of the world as being orderly. It's not that the world is completely disorderly. So he's putting forth an account of Zeus's ascendancy to power in a chronological sequence. So we may say that in the beginning, Hesiod is talking about the origin of early gods, including the Titans, who are children of Gaia, that is earth, and Uranos, that is heaven. So as soon as the Titans are born, Uranos conceals them in a hiding place within Gaia. Then Kronos, the youngest Titan, assisted by Gaia, castrates Uranos and assumes command. Then we have the Titans rebelling against Uranos, their father. Then we have the Olympian gods who are born by Kronos and Rhea. and Kronos eats their heads. And at some point, Rhea could not stand that for about her children, and she saved Zeus, and then Zeus rebelled against Kronos, and they defeated the Titans in battle. And then we have Zeus defeating Typhon, and then the Olympians proclaim Zeus as their ruler. Now, you may ask here, and Hesiod sort of anticipates this with his last stage of the myth. We may ask, if we had an order that succeeded the previous order, which is the order of the Titans, and the order of Kronos that succeeded the order of Uranus, why is Zeus's order going to last, or going to be everlasting, as Hesiod said? And Hesiod puts this idea that Zeus swallowed Metis, that is supposed to be wisdom. So by wisdom, we can the order we can impose can be just. And Hesiod did believe that the rule of Zeus is going to be everlasting, and it's going to be a just rule. That is not going to be an unjust. And I think there's a main theme here that we should highlight, according to Hesiod, is that we have a primordial nature that has both propensities for justice and injustice. And it is essentially, let's say, anarchic and disorderly, and we must impose that order. And to impose that order, we need wisdom. If we do not have wisdom, then any change we're going to bring is going to be like the change that Kronos brought forth, not the change that Zeus brought forth.
Because a lot of those ideas, in all sorts of ways, are built upon or mirrored in some of the Presocratics. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that's a good thing to point out. But Hesiod already is existing in a time where there's agriculture. Yeah. Things. It's not sort of civilization isn't brand new. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
There's already been hundreds or thousands of years, actually, of sort of settled civilization. So the idea that the Presocratics, or even someone like Homer, if he was one person, or Hesiod, is sort of suddenly realizing that, there's some sort of order to the world, the actual physical world in real life, I mean. It's like, well, no, of course they've had that concept has been around for centuries, since time immemorial, as far as they're concerned.
Yes.
There's a cause and effect, of course. And if you're wise, or if you observe the world, if you're rational about cause and effect in the real world around you, I mean, in real time, then that's better. That's a more wise way to live. Your civilization is going to be more sophisticated if you do that.
Yeah.
And I suppose the Presocratics, which is, I keep saying, a few hundred years after Hesiod, really, build upon that even further, don't they? Like some of them talk about the paradigm between sort of love and hate, or love and strife.
Yes,
or something like that.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. So don't you think that is mirrors or builds upon that the structure you just mentioned there in Hesiod?
Yes, I think that in Hesiod we do see an idea of a structure. He talks about the rule of Zeus as being a just and everlasting rule, and we have Zeus ordering other gods and, let's say, distributing particular domains to them. And as McKirahan says, that for Hesiod, the world is characterized by order, with the inferior divinities performing the functions assigned to them by Zeus. In fact, it is a moral order, since Zeus is closely associated with justice, peace, etc., and in Works and Days is the guarantor of justice through a system of rewards and punishments. So Hesiod is not someone who does not believe in an order, as you pointed out, but it's just that the order he believes in was an order imposed by anthropomorphic gods that could change their minds. Mm-hmm. So at the end of the day, although we do speak of an order, we do speak of a sort of imperfect order, one that could be disturbed.
And the gods are capricious.
Yes.
Right? They can change their mind. They can be completely unfair.
Yeah.
And change their mind on a dime for an irrational reason.
Yeah.
And you as humans just have to put up with that. There's nothing you can do about that.
And I must say that many Presocratics are portrayed as materialists. Some of them, like Democritus and Leucippus, were, but not all of them are. I would say most of them are not. It is just that they reacted against this anthropomorphic conception of the divine. So rather than saying that the notion of the divine makes no sense, we regularly see fragments involving the notion of the divine and speaking very highly of it. And they would say something of the following sort, that reason is that which is more divine in us, or our logos is that which is most divine in us. And the more we think in terms of the logos, the more we approximate our divine nature.
That's very interesting, isn't it? Because then that is a little bit more complicated than it first seems. So it's like we are sort of abandoning the idea that Zeus and his children control everything, but we're absolutely not abandoning the concept of divinity.
No.
Right, we're absolutely not abandoning it. It rests somewhere else. It rests maybe in the cosmos, maybe inside us. Well, that's what a lot of the Presocratics argue about, exactly that sort of thing.
Yes. And they were really much critical of a particular trend that we see regularly in Hesiod and Homer, that of portraying gods as being anthropomorphic, and having all the vices that we associate with human vices.
Yeah.
So they start a line of thinking that Plato is going to echo many years afterwards in his rejection of the poets, and in his claim that poets should be banned by the Republic, at least the way they practice their poetry, because they are portraying the divine in blasphemous terms. So they weren't all materialists, let's put it this way. Now, I think we should focus on the early Milesians. Now, Miletus was a Greek city-state, and Thales came from Miletus, and also Anaximander and Anaximenes. They are supposed to be the early Presocratics who revolutionized thinking. So there's a really interesting historical question as to why Miletus. And the thing is that we can have an idea as to why, but it's not definite. It is not an idea that can completely eliminate the personal factor that they brought in as individual thinkers. So this idea is, and this rationale goes in the following way, that Miletus was a Greek city-state in the west coast of Asia Minor.
So that's key. It's not mainland Greece.
No.
It's on the east side of the Aegean.
Yes.
It's much closer to modern Turkey. Well, it's modern Turkey, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, closer to Mesopotamia, to Egypt.
Right.
And it was a large, let's say, trading center. Or it had it was trading with all sorts of cities across the Mediterranean, as well as Egypt and Mesopotamia. So it was a very rich place. And it was also a place that was established after 1000 BC, after the fall of Mycenaean civilization. And the thing is that it was a major economic center. It was in touch with other city-states across the Mediterranean, and also close to the Middle East, the Lydians, the Egyptians, and the Mesopotamians. And the thing is that its society was aristocratic and secular. They did see themselves as Greeks. They spoke the Greek language, and they felt they had the same cultural heritage that was the poetic one, the one that Homer and later Hesiod is going to express. So the thing is that this doesn't explain, though, why particularly Miletus gave birth to 3 pioneering thinkers. And that is why many interpreters and scholars think that we cannot explain why Miletus without appealing to the individual genius of these 3 thinkers.
To watch the full video, please become a premium member at lotuseaters.com.